Vehicle safety audit has come around following on from last time's CPD with regard to BPCA. This is following on from we need to demonstrate that we are doing suitable audit. The document that we sent to you, we're going to break down into three areas. The first of all is looking at the document. We're then going to look at the vehicle element itself, i.e. what's in it. We're then going to move on, as James says, to a bit of the ladder safety side of things. And then say time to go out and actually get these done. It's the first time we've done this, so there may be a need to adjust the form. They may not work correctly. Appreciate any feedback that comes in just so that we can tweak for ongoing. We see this as an annual process rather than something you're going to have to do on a regular basis. Owners, again, leave it up to you as to how frequently you want them done kind of internally, as it were. But the idea being that at a moment in time, we have a documented record of what we are looking to do. In my experience, it's also a very good opportunity to clean out your vans and get rid of the things that you never find the time to normally. So hopefully that will make life a little bit easier. In terms of the form, if you've had the opportunity to have a look and to print it off, we've broken it down into different sections, the key being ladders. Now, not just from a BPCA point of view, but obviously from an HSE requirement, we use ladders on a very frequent basis. Therefore, there is a risk to them, and because they're used frequently, of course, damage can then occur. Now, not all of you have got all of these ladders, but you should all have telescopic. I'm fairly sure most of you will have extensions, and some of you will have the roof ladders that obviously slide up and down the roof and allow you to walk safely on the tiles. The idea here is not to make it any more complicated than look at something and report on it, and whether it works or doesn't work is exactly what we need to know. Now, the principle being, if it doesn't work, then of course the ladder shouldn't be being used. This is something you should look at more frequently, i.e. every time you use it anyway. So this document is just purely, as I say, a moment in time record of what we need to do. Or if legislation changes, we can then come back and have a little look at that. But the idea being, and if we run through telescopics, you know, they've got the rungs, are they bent, are they missing? We've got the rails, the bits on the side, labels, the locking mechanisms, particularly on telescopics, the rubber shoes as well. And I've just gone through and completed one where it's simple as, you know, it's not difficult, but it's a cross in either of the columns. If there is something wrong, then obviously it's a yes. And as a result of that, say that's where the ladders shouldn't be used, and make sure that we get them replaced. The one that I've highlighted here, which is the rubber shoes element, they are worn, or they can wear. And I know that some of you have got ladders where the rubber shoes and the rubber feet are starting to wear out. If they are, it's not the end of the world. However, if they have completely gone and you've got metal on concrete, then that is the time that they need to be replaced, and your ladders shouldn't be used. And please find time to make sure that you do get those ladders working properly. Now, the other side is if you tick that the ladder is in good condition and it's not, then, you know, woe betide you, because now's the opportunity to get these things fixed that need to be done. Equally, if the ladder isn't in good condition, then it shouldn't be used. And particularly, we just started talking about wasps, particularly where we've got a busy couple of months ahead of us where we'll be using ladders a lot more. The form also wants to look at other areas within the vehicle itself. So let's look at the waste bins. You know, it's something new to all of us in terms of how we need to manage waste. Now, first of all, make sure that you've got one, make sure that you've got the labels and the lids. This should all be quarantined, so fixed in the back of the vehicle. The column on the right-hand side, the amount, was purely just a, how much have you got? So this is making each of you visually check what's in it. Now, we shouldn't be creating significant amounts of waste. If you are, it'll be less than a year before you fill them up again. So the principle here is have a look in your bin and just see how much is there. Don't let it get to the point where it becomes 3/4 to almost full before raising the awareness, because we've then got to get rid of all of the waste that's in there. Out of date stock is an area where we shouldn't have this. It just shouldn't exist, because firstly, you don't need to hold a huge amount of stock anyway, because we can get it delivered or it can be delivered very quickly. The other side is if you do have product that goes out of date, it's not just a case of then throwing it in the bin. Two things here. The first one is the shelf life expiry date. And the second one is something going off label, i.e. you're not allowed to use it full stop. If there is a shelf life expiry date, make sure you use it up, because trying to get rid of something once it's gone past its expiry date is really difficult, but it's not the end of the world. If there is a product that comes off label And this would be, we've got 6 months to use it up, is usually the time restrictions that we've got. That then becomes almost impossible to get rid of, or it's very expensive to get rid of. So your chemical dates are really important. And as I say, if you've got anything that's due in the next 12 months, just make sure that you make a note of it. And ideally pull every bottle and every container that you've got. Make sure that all the tubs are opened and emptied so that you can see what you've got. If you're holding product for you use it once in a while, probably it's not the best thing to do is hold it, as in get rid of it. You don't need products sitting in the back of your vehicles. You don't have a huge amount of space at the best of times, so holding on to stuff that you don't need. As I say, it's also a good opportunity to then clean out the tubs and any recycling waste that you've got as well. The other thing that we will need to think of adding on to this, and we haven't looked at it yet, will also be your sprayers as part of this maintenance. So the calibration element and making sure that they are cleaned out will amend the form at some point to consider sprayers. But chemicals are the most important because they're just expensive to get rid of when they go off label or out of date. If you should find a product that expires in the next 12 months, it's not the end of the world. However, can you put a note in your diaries to make sure that you remove it from your vehicle at least 2 months before the end date? Now, ideally, use it up is the easiest way, and then we don't have this waste issue to deal with. Again, if you wait until a couple of weeks or a couple of days before the expiry date, it's then really difficult to get rid of quickly. If you are caught, or if in worst case would be an accident occurs and you're found to have a product that is out of date or off label, that would be deemed as a negligent element coming through. They are really hot on out of product labels, and particularly when it's come off label in terms of you can't use it at all. So just have a work.
Can I just add to that one? Sorry. And you're also uninsured. The insurers made some comment about something, and it was like, oh, by the way, if anything ever went wrong, it's not going to happen, but there's that tiny possible chance something goes wrong when they go, show me the bottle. Oh my God, it's out of date. Bang, you're not insured. But in the main, we all use it up. So, it shouldn't be a problem. And this just checks, doesn't it? That says, by the time we do the next audit in 12 months time, nothing you've got should be out of date, because we're basically trying to only keep stuff that's still in date by the next time we do the audit.
Absolutely.
That's the plan.
Yeah, good point. Didn't think about that.
I'll shut up now.
No, thank you. But I think, and to underline that, you don't need to hold on to lots of stock. Particularly the more experience you get, you'll understand what you do need within a year. But equally, supervisors and team leaders, that's where a bit of guidance to the new guys as to what they need. And as I say, don't overload the back of the vans, because there's just no need. It just makes trying to get in there and get kit out really difficult as well. From an electrical point of view, there is a line on that. Now, this is not the portable appliance kind of test that we're looking for. So you don't have to plug it in. You don't have to do anything other than visually check it. Now, ideally, it would be great if we could have a serial number. Thinking of insurance, that helps there if anything should happen on that point. But it's more just an identification. Obviously, age, most of your kit will be new. So that should all be fine. The principle being is look at the plug. Primarily look at the plug and see if it is cracked or broken in any way. Most of the drills, in fact, I'm thinking all of the drills, if any of you have got them, will be cordless. So it'll just be the charging unit that you've got. Probably ULV machines will be the main thing that you'll have. The plugs do break, and obviously if something is cracked, then you shouldn't be looking to use it. Now, we don't need to go down the world of mobile phone chargers. I'm assuming that most of you probably will have USB through from your vans anyway. Same thing with your credit card machines. So it's just the big, heavier items that we need a quick look at. Plugs to start with, the cable then obviously leading up to the unit itself, and then the actual unit. Obviously, if anything isn't working, then don't use it. As in, if anything is cracked, please make sure that it's repaired and replaced. From the safety side of things, the PPE, one of the things that I would ask you to all check, only because I noticed this the other day in one of the vehicles, is your hard hats. Now, hard hats have expiry dates. Now, it sounds silly because it's a lump of plastic, it doesn't really do anything. If it is out of date and you are in an accident with it, again, I would suspect insurances would come through, and it certainly wouldn't be deemed as a competent element. So please make sure your hard hat is checked on the date, and if it is out of date, it will need to be replaced. So you do have to throw your hard hats away from time to time. So that's the most important. Reading across the lines, obviously disposable gloves, make sure that you've got a lot of them and replacements, and equally with all your PPE, make sure they fit. Your respirator and your filters, make sure that they have got their own housing and that they've all got replacement filters that you have. Face shields, obviously, and high-vis jackets you use as you need. From the safety equipment, as James says, the stuff that's just been sent through, the eye wash, the first aid, the fire extinguisher, that should all be new. Now, if you haven't had time to fit them, and we're going to have a quick look at these now, can you make sure that you get them fitted as quickly as possible? And then again, we can go through this audit form and we can make sure that we've documented everything that we need to. So that's the form. It's no more complicated than that. With the ladders, one thing I forgot, sorry, if you can take some images of the ladders as well, again, just for a record point of view, so that we know as of the beginning, the middle of June, this is a condition and we have everything that we then need. From a first aid point of view, I would always recommend that you store these in the front of the vehicle. The idea being is that you know exactly where it is. It's also then in a clean environment, i.e. it's not in the back of the van where pesticides sit. Ideally make it so that, as I say, it's accessible. If that's strapped to the grill behind you or put underneath the passenger seat, it's up to you. From a risk or an accident point of view, unless you are suitably trained, and again we have to say this, don't administer first aid on anyone else. There is a case, not within pest control, but there are cases now of people suing someone who helped in first aid. Yeah, no win, no fee lawyers, because they weren't qualified and competent in knowing what to do. Now, in reality, all you've got in there are plasters, probably a few bandages outside of that. So it's not really anything more than putting a plaster on. The one thing that James did send through, sorry, let me go back to that, is antihistamines.
Ollie.
Hello?
Ollie, sorry, can I just quickly ask?
Yeah.
Would it be all right to get some holder for the first aid kit, James?
Some what, sorry?
A holder to put the actual first aid kit in, like a bracket holder. Because me personally, I've got no room at all under my seats. And I could actually sort of drill it into the back of my door. I've got an area where I can get it. Can we get them?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
as in, do you want me to get it for, or as in, I suggest you get it.
Yeah, that's fine.
Because
I don't mind.
I'll order the wrong thing.
Either way, I'll sort it. Okay, cool.
Perfect. Yeah, it's a good point, because actually brackets is one where we look at the eye wash as well, because I know that there were separate brackets and housings for those as well. Antihistamine being something that please make sure you have access to it. Now, again, you guys who are new to the industry or new to the company, if you do get stung, please make sure you use antihistamine. It will hurt the first time that you're stung. You will get used to it, as you guys who have been around for a little longer, I'm sure, will testify to. However, the more that you get stung in one go, as in if you get multiple stings, you know, that really can hurt. So make sure you got your antihistamines. They're all non-drowsy, so you'll be fine on that side of things. That is as much as you administer to yourself, and certainly as much as the company give you. Obviously, anything stronger than that, then you go to a doctor. If you are involved in any accidents, and this also includes hitting your head in an attic, note to who it was, then we do need to be completing accident records and accident books as well, please. I'm happy to manage all of this or send it through to James, but we should have a record on anything that has happened. If for no other reason than we've just know what happened, and we can then have a chat about it and collectively go, right, let's make sure this doesn't happen again. But I say, from a first aid point of view, this is purely for you rather than you administering to anyone else. Dry powder fire extinguishers were also part of the list. Ideally, these should be located close to the driver's seat as well. I put them on the driver's side of your seat, so that if you ever have need to get hold of them, you literally just open up the door. Now, in terms of fires, obviously, we're not asking you to become firefighters. This is for small electrical fires only. It's very unlikely for anything in the back of your van to catch fire. We just simply don't have any of that kit. So if anything should happen from the engine or within the cab, that's the point with this. Needless to say, if it gets out of hand or anything bigger, then call the fire brigade when they arrive. Confirm that pesticides are inside the vehicle, because if they start to use water, that then creates environmental contamination risks. So they then start to use foam. Now, the conversation for another time is also about hazard warning stickers on the back of your vehicles, which some of you do, but most of you don't have. Now, whether we go down the route of marked vehicles or not marked vehicles, we should start thinking about the hazard warning signs. These do have a shelf life. Most of them have actually got a little pressure gauge on the side of them. So as soon as that, although I think they've got a 5-year warranty as well, I seem to remember from an email from James. So they can sit there and hopefully they will never be used. And then we'll have this conversation in 4.5 years' time, and we can then start to replace them. So hopefully they won't be used, but just make sure they're accessible if you do. In terms of disposable gloves, obviously from a operational point of view, disease, good practice, and importantly, product label, every product label will tell you to wear a glove in some way, shape or form. Make sure that you've got a lot of them. Make sure you don't run out of them. From a liquid insecticide, of course, disposable gloves aren't suitable. You will need your nitrile gloves, but as an absolute minimum, you should have your disposable gloves. The one thing that I would say, and Stuart, you picked up on the holders to this, I would personally have a holder fixed to the opening door so that the gloves are literally the first thing that I can grab hold of as soon as I open the back of the vehicle. Put them on, and then of course everything that you touch after that, whether it has residues of pesticide or not, it just means that your hands are protected. And of course they're the last things that you then take off and throw into your waste bin, and then you close the doors, which moves on nicely then to the hand gels and to the anti-bacs. So it should be that as soon as you've taken off gloves, the next thing that you do is put on your gels, certainly before you go back into the cab of your vehicle, so that you then have a nice clean space in which you drive and have lunch and do your reports and all that kind of stuff, rather than any pesticide residues. Obviously, and needless to say, hopefully replace the gel containers before they run out. And I'm assuming that centrally, James, if they need a replacement, then just let you know, or just go and buy one.
I might send, actually, I might even just send out a spare. I didn't think about a spare straight away, but everything I need at home ever that I use often, I always have a spare sitting there. So when I use the spare, I order another one at that point. So I will send everyone another one.
Hand wipes and wet wipes, again, anti-bac, are also a useful thing to have in the cab if you shouldn't have any gel. Eye wash, there are lots of eye wash containers that were sent to you within the box. Hopefully, again, a bit like all of this, you'll never need any of them. But the idea being is that these are equally accessible. Now, I wouldn't store these in the cab of the vehicle. These I would put on the back door or the door that you use more frequently. Now, the times that you generally have accidents that occur with eyes, as in the need to use eye wash, is when you're mixing. So you pour a concentrate into the compression sprayer, you add water. If you're not wearing a face shield, you potentially get splashback and that goes into your eye. Or, and this happens an awful lot, you've left pressure in your compression sprayer, you throw it in the back of the van, the trigger is then accidentally knocked, and the liquid comes out and gets you in the eye, and Sod's Law states it always does. That's when you generally have the DR5s is a usual suspect for that as well, where pressure is left in and then you get dust. So again, just be really careful and make sure that you depressurize everything before you put them in the back of the vehicle. Make sure that you know where these are, because of course the one problem that you have when you have something in your eye is that you can't see. And more importantly, time is of the absolute essence, because your eyes are very good at absorbing pesticides, particularly liquid insecticides. So with each of these cartridges, and that's where again the dispenser is there, so you should be able to rip off one cartridge, you take the lid off, and obviously you tip your head back and you then flush all of the liquid within that one unit through your eye. I'd actually say what you then do is use another cartridge to wash it again a couple of minutes later, and just make sure that you've got everything out of your eye. Now, again, this will require an accident record for any long-term impact that you need. We would need to record this. So it's please let me know if anything should happen. Now, again, hopefully nothing will, but eyes are particularly important. Just on other elements of your vehicle, kind of moving into the ladder side of things, roof racks, don't forget, you know, these carry obviously heavy items, particularly as we're driving along a lot. You know, they can become loose, they can become damaged. please make sure that you check them on a very frequent basis. And again, particularly now, we're probably taking the ladders on and off more, or certainly over the next couple of months, than we do for the rest of the year. Just make sure that it all works properly. Now, equally, this is not, sorry, just going back on the form, this is not to omit everything else that you need to legally do with your vehicles. And I'm sorry to be the dull health and safety person here, but the tires, your lights, the brake fluids, all that kind of stuff is important to do. Don't wait for the lights to come on. You should be checking them on a regular basis. And as I say, that's a legal driving requirement more than anything else. With your roof racks, you obviously then have the tie-ons to make sure that the ladders don't slip. Can you please make sure they're working, they're not broken, the usual type things that we're looking to do here. And for those of you who've got the roll bar at the end, again, just make sure that it's fixed in place. The occasional oiling up and lubrication is probably a useful piece as well, just to make sure that everything works as it should do. But your roof racks are really important, because there's an awful lot of weight that's carried on top of your vehicle. Now, for you guys who don't use your ladders on a regular basis, you know, question whether you need to be carrying them full time. For you guys who have got roof ladders, and I'm going to underline this for a couple of you, don't forget that that makes you 2 foot taller than you would normally be. So just remember on low entrances. In terms of ladders, we kind of touched on this last time, but looking at it in a bit more detail, any damage that you have to the steps or the rungs or the side rails needs to be replaced. Very rarely can you repair ladders nowadays. Now, any damage that occurs, and it can literally be as simple as a dent like this, would mean that the ladder is ineffective. Even if you can use it, even if you can stand on it, it needs to be replaced. Because if you do have an accident and it is damaged, and it was deemed that the damage was done before the accident, again, just thinking of what James said, you know, insurances and all that kind of stuff would then really take a very dim view of that.
And just to add though, but more importantly, the point is, if it's damaged, presumably the whole point is, therefore it might fail, therefore you might die. And we don't actually care about insurance. We care about you not dying. So that's the biggest takeaway is, any problems with any of it, just fix it or get it replaced.
And the other piece, when it's not just, if you can see the cursor, it's not just the obvious sign in the example that we've got here. What you can also get is cracking where it's soldered into place. And again, you guys who have got ladders who are older, as in they've had more use, that is an area that you equally need to inspect and make sure that there's nothing untoward in those kind of areas. And also make sure that you have the correct weight limitations. Now, I appreciate this is, you only need to do it once, but let's just make sure that all of us have a read of the ladder and make sure that it is the right ladder for the right weight. So bigger guys, you need bigger, heavier ladders. But equally make sure that you don't have amateur use ladders, because these are now becoming much more prevalent as well, i.e. you have professional use and you have amateur use. Those of you with extension ladders or the extending ladders, make sure that the locking mechanism works as well. And obviously you know how it works. Any damage and any faults, as with all of this, then makes the whole ladder completely useless and not to be used. In terms of the rubber feet, they do fall out. They do wear out as well. So again, please check that. Now, this is something you should be checking every single time you use the ladder anyway. However, once a year, let's just do a definitive record that we have it. Equally, the inspection is not just a, yes, I've got it, but if it is wearing out and it's not going to last for another quarter, particularly with summer ahead of us, do something about it now. Don't wait for the metal on stone, because that's when they slip, and that's exactly when you then start to get problems falling. As I say, when we then start to look at the rubber feet, that's the point. Now, if you haven't got added stabilizers, as in, sorry, that makes it sound a bit like your child's bikes, but you can get wider based feet attachments now that will help and support the rubber feet that you've got. Again, something to think about, but I'll leave that with each of you. On the side, if there are any labels, and this is a new requirement that is coming through now, that label requirements should not be damaged and also have to be readable. In this particular example that we've got, that red line goes vertical when the ladder is at the right angle. So that is something to think about. If you haven't got one of these stickers, it might be worth adding it. Make sure that you have the correct angle, as I say, when you put the ladder up. For those of you with roof ladders, it's usually the wheels or the flip bar that that are bolted on, they're the bits that become loose over time. And again, particularly if you leave them on your vehicle for as in all the time, you've got a lot of wind as you're driving along, then that is going to potentially affect all of the joints. Just make sure that they're tight and that they that nothing's going to obviously come off. If it's an extension type roof ladder, exactly the same principles for your extension ladders as in the locking mechanisms, the slide rungs, and just make sure that all the tile protectors are in place as well. Telescopic ladders, and you've all got these. The key is making sure that the clips still work. These do go, as in they will become worn and they will slip is probably the best description on that side. Again, repair them, replace them, stop using your ladder, but make sure that it's safe to use. The key with these, again, is the rubber feet. Now, most of the time, I suspect you'll be using these inside, as in getting into attic spaces. So the element of slip shouldn't be that great. However, if we're thinking wasps' nests just around the corner, then we'll start to use them more outside. So just be careful. And one more, they will bend. And again, make sure that you've got the right weight allocations. Again, bigger guys, you're going to need bigger, heavier ladders because they will over time bend. Now, that doesn't mean that they will necessarily not go back into place either. So it might be that they'll still concertina down, but when you pull them out, they may be slightly bent. So please fully extend it and make sure that without any weight on it, it should be all nice and straight. In terms of ladder safety, again, this is a big area for the company on that side. It is 15 minutes maximum. Any job that's longer than that, and this doesn't mean if a job is longer than that, where you will not be coming down the ladder, as in you go up and you're going to be longer than 15 minutes, it is probably not the right methodology to be doing the work, as in you should be thinking about cherry picker or scaffolding. If you go up, you do a job, you come back down again, you move the ladder on the same site, and I'm thinking about bird proofing, go up, put in another bolt hole, come back down, put in another bolt hole, that would be deemed as less than 15 minutes per usage, even though you'll well be on site for most of the day. Check working loads, make sure it's on flat level ground. Don't use any wedges to try and get level. If you need an angled support, then go and get one. Make sure the ladder is long enough, obviously. Don't forget the 4-in-1 rule. So again, you guys who are new, we did cover this as part of the health and safety day, but for every unit you go out, that's 4 units you go up, or every 4 units you go up, you come out 1 unit. And that's where the angled red line on the label should then be vertical, and that means that it's at the correct angle so that you shouldn't have slippage. Don't overreach, belt buckles to stay within the stars, and again, particularly when we talk about bird work, with wasps, you are generally in close proximity and you shouldn't need to do any other fixings. As I say, bird work is usually you try and get 2 or 3 fixings done without moving the ladder, just to save a bit of time, but it does mean that you then start to lean. 3 points of contact, which makes it very difficult to hold equipment as you are then starting to walk up the ladder. So 3 points of contact, 2 feet, 1 hand, or 1 hand, or 2 hands, 1 feet, as in you are moving up and down the ladder. You shouldn't have to carry anything. Make sure that it is clipped to you, or you use the slings, and I'm thinking DR5s for wasps' nests coming into play. And obviously don't go higher than the top 3 rungs as well. Only light tools to be carried. If you need anything, and we are moving into the world of ladder safety proper here, i.e. if you're doing bird proofing jobs and you're carrying drills, you really need to be questioning whether a ladder actually is the right methodology, or you need to tie the drill to you just to make sure that if you drop it, it doesn't hit the floor or hit anyone else, more importantly. And if you are in a really risky environment, then you may need to consider a second person from a ladder point or a ladder usage point of view. Ladders kind of moves us into attics from, and again, from a wasp nest point of view, thinking about all of those. We do have to be careful about using customers, and I'm really sorry to be, again, a dull health and safety guy here, but if you use a wooden ladder that is not considered a professional grade piece of equipment, particularly in older properties where the locking mechanisms may have failed or may not be working particularly well. Now, most people who have a loft attic know how it works. You turning up on site once might not know how it works. So if a ladder is in place, and sometimes it's quite difficult to operate around an attic ladder, as in it opens when the trap door opens. Make sure the owner or the occupier sets the ladder for you. So at least there is that element of competence that can come into play. Or of course, and this has to come as the line and the policy that we'll be taking, is think about using your telescopic ladder. This just does away with everything on site and say, if possible. Don't forget the HSE guidance documents in terms of ladders. And again, you guys who are new to the company, please make sure that, and if you want the links, I'm happy to send them through. We will also upload them to the CPD platform so that you can have a look at them there. But just read through ladders and step ladders, and there is now one for telescopic ladders as well, just so that we can refresh ourselves before we start getting into the busy time. Just on attic spaces, while we talk about health and safety elements and cluster flies, and I appreciate we've probably been through the season there, but you know, balancing on beams is not the best way that we should be looking to do work in attics. If you are uncomfortable in terms of walking through attics and it's not complete and there is lots of loft insulation, then we should be thinking about crawl boards that obviously distribute the weight and mean that we don't have to stand on the rafters. Don't forget trailing cables as we go up into attics, and more importantly, hidden trailing cables where we've got insulation over the top, so you're trying to feel your way through. Low beams as well, so bump caps may need to be required in certain environments. And when we then throw wasps on top of that, again, your PPE being your wasp suit, your gloves, your respirators. If you wear half face, then you should be thinking about goggles. There's a lot of kit that you're going to have to carry. And don't forget, as it gets warmer, you will dehydrate quicker. So just make sure that you carry lots of fluids with you over summer, just so that you can have a drink afterwards. It sounds really silly, but please make sure that you do keep your fluids up. Just one reminder, of course, whilst you are in attics, and again, when we start talking about throwing dust around in attic spaces from professionally throwing dust around, obviously, in attic spaces from a bat point of view, just make sure, even if you do the treatment from the outside, that you do a survey inside to make sure that you are not going to affect bats in any way, shape or form. Now, red squirrels fall into this in terms of the Wildlife and Countryside Act. Importantly, squirrels in this conversation about wasps are non-target species. So you cannot harm a grey squirrel with insecticides whilst doing a wasp treatment. It would be considered a non-target species. And again, that's exactly where your STRAP document comes into play to ask you about non-targets. So working at height, if you don't have to, the constant messages don't, that's exactly where dust sticks come into play. However, from an efficacy point of view, that also means that it has to work. So again, do a survey up into the attic first of all. If you can treat it from the attic, it is probably a much more effective process. If you can and do remove the nest, then obviously it's something that you can show back to the customers. If you can't gain access to it, and that's in this example where people, more and more properties are now going into the converted attic space, you probably will have to do it from outside, and that's where your dust sticks come into play. Sometimes it might be that you have a combination of the two. Again, make sure that the ladder is at the right angle, and as you would do normally, but obviously you've got the added PPE coming in with your wasp suit that just makes peripheral vision a little more difficult. So again, just think before you start throwing up ladders with wasp nests. And again, just from an operational point of view, wasp nests take 2 minutes to do, maybe 5 minutes to do. Making sure you've got your ladder straight, that you've got your PPE on properly, that the customer understands everything that you're doing is part of the price. So that means that you've got 5 minutes to make sure that it's all set before you actually start going up the ladders. Another area, and I appreciate you are probably doing lots of proofing all through the year, so it's a reminder ongoing on that side from a solar panel side of things. Again, you guys new to the business, this is where there are great opportunities for additional income coming in. However, how do we do them is the constant question that we need to ask ourselves. And it is it winning the job or getting cheap work? And if a ladder is not suitable and you must do the on-site assessment, and you do have to consider getting from the ladder onto your roof ladder, you really do need to be thinking about either scaffolding and just simple scaffold towers, as we've got in the image, or a cherry picker if it is deemed suitable, will have to be part of the cost of the job. And if the customer isn't prepared to pay it and you deem the risk is suitably high, you have to question whether you want them as a customer at all. Now, equally, when we talk about the cherry picker, or the image, I should say, looking at the cherry picker going up to the chimney, is where we then start to bring in feral honeybees. So again, if we start to, and we did touch on this last time, but for you new starters, if you get involved in feral honeybees and you do a treatment from below, you will have to remove honeycomb as part of the treatment process. And that invariably is not from a ladder. It will require a cherry picker or scaffolding, obviously. In terms of solar panels, if you are going to work above them, then obviously there are tools and systems that come into play. And it's always this question of, you can gain access to the base, you can gain access to the side, but how do you gain access across the top? If you don't have one of these ladders, or you don't have the equipment, hire it and make sure that goes in as part of the job. But again, we shouldn't be scrabbling around on the top of roofs installing bird equipment and using the solar panel as the stop fall system, i.e. you're sitting on the solar panel top, preventing you from slipping down the roof. One final piece, and to underline on the treatment report side of things, whenever you do the treatments, and again, thinking from a health and safety point of view, make sure that you record what you have done and why. Now, you have the strap, you have all of the GRAs, but if anything is site specific, that's exactly what is found on the treatment report. So, and also as well, please make sure that your treatment reports carry useful information. Writing 2 or 3 words as part of observations isn't a suitable report. Now, it's something that we have to do. It's something that we want to do because it's a professional part of the service. It's the document that you leave with the customer that next time you want them to keep it safe, you want them to put it into a drawer so that next time that's exactly where they'll come, and they've obviously got your details then, and hopefully they'll then come directly. So pest found, try and put a little bit of information in terms of the location, not just found wasps. Ideally try and put the, as I say, the location, the methodology that you'll use to get close to them, even why they could be a risk. Your observations can fill in any site-specific needs that the strap can't help, I say, which is where particular details around children or non-target species may come in. The details of the service is the perceived value of the job. So again, what you write in here is the bit that probably sits more with the customer if they read the treatment report after you've left. So please make sure that, you know, good information, beneficial information, professional information, which is what we're all trying to do and deliver here. From a pesticide point of view, and from a control of pesticides regulations, and increasingly the biocides, you need to write down in the pesticide used, what you used, how much of it, and where you put it. Please just don't write rat bait or just brodifracum or bromidilin or whatever it is that you use. It should be the trade name and or active ingredient. We then need to put in the quantity, either the quantity you applied per site, or if you're going to be detailed, per baiting point. And any other safety information that you then have relating back to the pesticide. And that is a legal requirement in accordance, as I say, with biocides and control of pesticides. So please make sure you fill that section in properly as well. In terms of recommendations, and again, from a health and safety point of view, anything that you want the customer or perceived with the customer, then that can go in there. If you need a follow-up, which obviously for things like wasps and bird proofing generally we don't, but obviously that's the piece. Importantly, and again, just to remind all, please make sure that the customer signs it and you get them to print their name. If the occupant is not the bill payer, leave the piece of paper with the occupant, take a picture of the signed treatment report, and that's the one that is then emailed off with the invoice to the bill payer. But again, your treatment reports are really important. Please spend a couple of minutes filling them in, because ultimately that's the piece of paper that you leave behind. And that's the piece of paper that could become the next job later down the line. And there we go.
So I just wanted to add, so in terms of working at height, so accidents that have sort of ever happened, we had, so some of you are aware, some not. So Richard went up a warehouse with a ladder to look at their netting. He didn't tie the ladder off on the top. It was a windy day. The ladder blew over, landed on the owner's brand new Audi, and the owner was fine. He's great friends with Richard, but it was an accident. So that was one, so tied off. David had a customer, and then they'd arranged for the neighbour to be in so he could pop next door. The neighbour wasn't in. David was like, oh, I can just jump over the fence, have a look. So he put a ladder up one side and a step ladder the other, went across, did his inspection, came back up the ladder and swung his, so from memory, David, you're about 8 foot off the ground. But anyway, he swung his legs around and sort of committed to going. And as they came around, they hit the step ladder, knocked it over. David continued, dropped down, landed on a flower pot broke. He put his hands out and broke his wrist. That was another one. And then countless of you have put your feet through the ceiling from someone's loft. Cruel board is the main one. And then going back to solar panels, basically scaffolding, cherry picker. Like, you know, you're going to need to be up there for 2 hours. Don't let the customer persuade you that you should risk your life on a ladder just because they don't want to spend 500 quid or 800 quid on some scaffolding. You are more valuable to your friends, your family than that. So basically, solar panels is scaffolding, cherry picker, or just don't do it. I can't imagine a scenario where it's ever worth it. So just don't do it. And then just common sense. I guess, you know, if you can avoid being at height, then don't be at height. Some of you now have got CO2 compression wasp sprayers. You know, you can use those from down below. And yeah, just don't take a risk of working at height, because if you land on your head, you can be dead. And even if you land on your head from 6 foot, you can be dead. So it's not that I'm only 8 foot up. Yeah, any more questions about anything else?
James?
Yeah.
Can I just ask a question about fire extinguishers?
Yeah.
So potentially the vehicle fire extinguishers, can they be used for, shall we say, if you're doing, shall I say, a smoke generator treatment for, say, honeybees in a chimney? Potentially, because obviously the insurance purposes, we need a fire extinguisher when we're using smoke generators. So that's exactly
it. That's exactly it. It's called. So initially it was like, do you even need a fire extinguisher? Oh, hang on, you do occasionally use smoke generators. Why wouldn't you have one? So absolutely, it is there for any use you can imagine. Just not big fires run away. Yeah, it's just to have one. So all of this is like hopefully you never need it. You know, you don't need eye wash if you always wear a face mask. Et cetera. But you know, you will need antihistamine realistically, or you might benefit from antihistamine certainly. Yeah, hopefully you never need it. But yeah, no, that's fine. Fire extinguishers, you know, use them wherever you need them. And obviously, if you use it, you need a replacement. So get a replacement.
And Liam, that's also why there were dry powder fire extinguishers, so that they are usable on all fire types.
But that's everything. If everyone can go and take the vehicle inspection record and just try and complete it, take some photos of ladders, any ladders that need to be replaced, let everyone know, any rubber bungs, we need to sort that out. And then in effect, we'll reaudit it next month and go, let's make sure, has everyone sent it in? Well, we'll do it beforehand, but basically the final check will be next month. Have we got everything back from everyone? Have any ladders been replaced that need to be replaced, etc., etc. And then if you email it to me, and then I'll collate it and send it to Oliver. Is that a good one, Oliver?
Yeah, fine. Yep.
Photos of ladders.
Oh, yes, please, yes.
Yeah, all right.
I think Jack's doing it live.
Shall we wrap up?
Yep.
There we go.
Brilliant. Thanks everyone for coming.